Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Catherine Mattice here. I have Marlene Chisholm here with me today. And Marlene works with C-suite leaders and teams who want to have drama-free cultures. So Marlene and we are on the same page. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. She's written a book that's coming out, From Conflict to Courage, How to Stop Avoiding and Start Leading, and definitely have a lot to talk about there. And she's also a fellow LinkedIn Learning instructor, and she's done some courses on difficult conversations and anger management. So we're definitely in the same world here. So Marlene, thank you so much for making time with me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Tell me first, how did you get into working in the drama-free workplace and dealing with difficult conversations and all of that?
Well, that would take up the whole time. It takes, they say you teach what you need to learn. So I'll leave it at that I have had a lot of drama in my life, but through my journey of reinvention, which happened, 20 years ago, I finally jumped into getting a master's degree, kind of not knowing where I was going to go next. And my professor said, if you'll do a master's degree and get a capstone, you can be like Stephen Covey and you can build a whole platform off of that. And I thought, I don't know what that means, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. So my capstone was entitled Drama in the Workplace Hampers Productivity, the Effect of Relationships on the Bottom Line. And as I started digging, I found that, drama, which I have a new definition for it, but my definition for it started spidering out to where it affects your health, it affects productivity, it affects relationships, it works in your personal life. So because this has been a real journey of self-healing for me, I have the philosophy that if something's difficult for me, it is for millions of other people. And I just want to grow in this and share what I'm learning.
Wow, that is something else we have in common, because that's how I got into my world. I had my own personal experiences and started graduate school, and grad school was the key to where I'm at now. So gosh, we're going to be fast friends here. So talk to me about your thoughts on how leaders mismanage conflict.
I often say that people think that conflict is a problem, and I used to think that too. And when we look at conflict as a problem, and I know there's all these memes about embrace conflict and all this kind of stuff, but I now have come to this place with it, is to say conflict is not the problem. The mismanagement of conflict is the problem. Mm-hmm. And so the ways that managers, leaders, we mismanage conflict is, I call it the 3 A's: avoiding, appeasing, and aggression. And when we avoid conversations just because they seem difficult or sticky, that creates even more layers on top of what's already there. And so I started this body of work with the understanding that it shows up in these 3 main roots, but at the root of all of it is avoidance. So even aggression in my mind is avoidance.
Ah, that is interesting. That is an epiphany I'm having as you're saying that. That makes sense. So when I'm coaching leaders who engage in bullying behavior, we really lean on and I say we because there's a group of us who are all using the same method. We use fight or flight as a big component of that. And I talk about aggression, obviously, is fighting, but in some ways it is fleeing. You're turning my world upside down.
Well, and really, we're trying to get over the conflict myself. And so I am never judging anyone else, because I look at my work as healing myself as well. Physician, heal thyself. But what I've really come to understand is that aggressiveness and being sarcastic and being a smart aleck is avoiding intimacy. Right. It's avoiding looking at someone as an equal. It's the need to be superior. It's the need to make someone wrong. And so therefore, we're not looking in the mirror at where we need to grow to be able to handle something that feels threatening. Because if I need to be superior, I can do that through my title, through my aggression, through me keeping you in fear so that I get to win. So it's based on needing to win versus the desire to understand and collaborate.
Right. So, oh my gosh, mind blown. You've turned my world upside down. This is good. Where does that come from? So what, I guess I feel like, yeah, we all mismanage conflict, probably because we don't really learn how to do it well, unless our parents are amazing at managing conflict and maybe they're conflict experts and teaching us, but most of us don't have that. So What are some ways that maybe we can start learning how to, manage conflict versus mismanagement?
Yeah, this is kind of what I've uncovered through doing this work is that the reasons that we mismanage has to do with I think two things. First of all, we don't have the skill set. So we go, okay, we don't have the skill. So I'm going to take courses on LinkedIn, or I'm going to go to college, or I'm going to take a workshop or a full day or a retreat, and we think I'm going to build skills. But it's not just the skill sets, because that is what I call the outer game. And that is valuable to have those skill sets. But when it doesn't work, it's because someone's using those skill sets and it seems disingenuous. It's like, oh, I'm curious, but I'm not really curious. I'm asking you a question to trap you. So there's this outer game that we play of learning the skill sets. Then there's what I call the inner game. And the inner game is me being able to expand my capacity. So I'm introducing a concept in this book called conflict capacity.
Okay.
The idea is that conflict capacity, in order to manage conflict, we as leaders have to build conflict capacity. And there's three parts to that. One part is the skill set. The other part is what I call the inner game. And I have been practicing this here lately. I've got a really controversial thread on Facebook right now as people are talking about the pandemic and the different viewpoints about whether the pandemic is even real, whether there's a new world order happening, whether he is to be trusted, whether you're a sheep or a lion. All this stuff and disrespect is coming out because we're protecting our identities. So for me, people are commenting on my back thread saying, wow, the way you're handling yourself. And I'm thinking it's a slippery slope, because I'm trying to expand myself to hear things that I think are 100% science fiction and ridiculous, with saying, what if there's some value in this? What if there's something that I go, oh, I get why they feel that way, or they have a right to see it that way, even if I see it differently, because it's so confusing nowadays. So for me, part of that is the inner capability to have someone say something really sarcastic and not shoot it back, because I am extremely sarcastic and quick-witted. So for me, it's to hold back and to not like buy into that energy, and to maybe ask a question. Or when someone says, well, you need to just question the news sources you're watching, I want to say, are you questioning yours? Because obviously you think you're the one that has all the answers. So like, it's withholding that desire to be right and to win a match point, and to say, I'm going to show up in a way that defines my leadership. And when necessary, I'll use that one tool, but I'm not going to overuse it. So it's not only inner game, outer game, and then for us leaders, it's culture as well. Because if the culture does not support that, you are going to struggle regardless of your inner and outer game.
Right. Okay. And how do you convince leaders to care about this as an interpersonal skill? Because I do see, one of the key pieces of bullying, one of the reasons it thrives, is that the leader, whoever is in charge of that person, is really avoiding stepping in. And, there's all sorts of reasons some people are uncomfortable, or how do we convince leaders that this is an interpersonal skill that they really need?
They have to want it, because they've experienced enough pain in damaging their relationships, whether that's through several divorces, or whether that's through losing jobs, or whether that's through, I want to be a different person, but I can't find out how to align the me that I want to be with the me that I am. Or I'm tired of needing to be right all the time, that's just, it's an old game and it's worked for me so far. Like, I always have a saying that people do what they do because it works. And it works for someone if they don't want to change. So you're not going to change that person. It has to stop working for them in some way. So the way that it would stop working is if in the culture, the upper leadership said, these are our values. It won't work if you just hope they change and you go, well, yeah, we've got these values, but they're really a high performer. It's not going to change, because that's cultural. So as long as things work for someone, whether that's through their value system or through manipulation and control, people do what they do because it works. And we all are going to face a time in our lives where we're going to have an awakening and realize we're only here for a short time. And this is getting really philosophical, but when people hit 50 and 60 years old, you start going, wow, like, is this all there is? Is this who I am? So in my mind, it's a leadership identity issue, that if I see myself as fair, but someone else shows a mirror to me where I am sarcastic and I'm unapproachable, that disconnect makes me want to figure out, I can either spend my time being right and you just don't see me, or else I can say, what in that is trying to shape me into the person I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. I'm curious about your thoughts on this. So part of my coaching is to hold up that mirror. I do a 360. That's a very unique type of 360. And ultimately I'm able to say, look, person engaging in bullying behavior, high conflict person, whatever you want to call them. I know you're really focused on competence and success of the organization, but this feedback really shows that people don't think you're competent in your leadership or your ability to have relationships and things. And so that mirror seems to really, make a difference for them. But I'm curious if my question is that I often see that competence is what's driving that behavior. Either they're scared of looking incompetent, or they've been told their whole life they're very competent. And so they're really striving for that. I'm just curious if you see that in your work, that competence and conflict tend to be somewhat related.
Yeah, I think it relates to their identity as well as their willingness to be open, like on that scale of, there's the 5 personalities, like openness versus, I believe those that are more open and they're open for a reason are going to be more willing. Because I always say nothing changes until someone's willing. Willingness is the fulcrum point of change. If someone does not want to change and they have a belief and an identity that this is how it is, this is, a Midwestern saying, how the cow eats the cabbage. This is how it is. This is who I am. And if you don't like it, find yourself another place to work. I'm just being honest. This is not hurtful. If I'm going to take that stance, nothing's going to change me because I'm closed to that opinion. But what I have found, and I bet you found this too, when you give that feedback, if there's defensiveness, but they keep talking about it, it means that it's churning, right?
Yeah.
So when someone says, it didn't really bother me, but, and then when they say that like the 5th time, I don't really care, but.
Right.
People talk about it and justify it. In my mind, that means there's an opening. They're like, it does bother them, because if it doesn't bother you, you don't talk about it. You just go, end of story. You don't keep trying to convince other people that you're right if you think you're right. You just think you're right.
Right. I find that too as well. We have lots of people saying hi and they're happy to join. So all of you listening in, do feel free to ask Marlene questions. I've got some of my own, but would love to ask yours first. So please do ask questions if you have any. So I'm curious what your thoughts are for if you have a high conflict employee. So maybe this is more for manager level. You have an employee on your team who's a high conflict individual, overly sarcastic, or always arguing with others. I know many managers have been there. You feel like you've asked them to stop thousands of times and it doesn't. What's your advice for those managers out there?
I love that, because I often, this is sort of glib, but people will say, hey, I've told them 1,000 times. I've had the conversation. And I'll say, do you know what that means? And they'll say, what? I'll say, it means you've allowed the conversation or the behavior 999 times. So when you keep saying, I've had the conversation, either something's not specific and clear and it's very general, like you need to shape up your attitude. Hey, I've told them they need to change their attitude. Well, see, that's not clear. I don't know what that means when you say that's just your opinion that I've got a bad attitude. But when, as a leader, I say, you rolled your eyes and crossed your arms, that behavior, I don't know why you did it. And I don't want to assume you're not engaged or that you don't care, because that's my story. So if I can separate, and I teach a model for that in the book of how to like break that down, but it's basically, here's what I noticed, and you have to do it as quickly as you can, because people's behavior, our behaviors are so subconscious, we don't know that we do it. I used to be a big eye roller, and I joined Toastmasters when I was learning how to speak and before I ever started this career. And one of the pieces of feedback, you get a lot of feedback in that organization. I just think it's a wonderful organization.
Yeah.
But pieces of feedback I got is that when you disagree, it's all over your face and you tend to roll your eyes and like kind of, you shake your head and like you don't know how to answer a question by just taking the question. That was so painful to me. But without that mirror, I didn't know that I did that. So I had to work on it. When I was, as a LinkedIn instructor, I remember Carlos, my producer, when I'm doing anger management, he says, Marlene, you're so intense. Learn how to smile. I'm like, well, I'm talking about anger. We all have anger. And it felt so inauthentic, but we want to understand how people are perceiving us.
Hmm.
We want to match our intention with the way we're seeing it. So I think, the feedback is valuable, and we don't see ourselves as others do. But the thing we can do as a leader is to say, hey, Tony, I noticed that you just rolled your eyes and you let out a sigh. Do you disagree? Feel free to bring that forward in meeting. And people go, do that even in the moment? Yes, in the moment, because here's what will almost always happen. Oh, no, 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 I'm just a little chilly, and it's just something to think about. Then you can circle back later and say, hey, I didn't want to catch you off guard, but I've noticed that a couple of times. Think about it. And if you want to talk about it, I'm open. I want to hear your opinions. That's
Yeah.
how you start changing that behavior, because people will almost always say, oh, no, you're just too sensitive, or you just perceive something. And my opinion is let them off the hook, because when people are in denial, they go right into persecutor or victim mode. So they have to have time to process it. And if we really want to help people, it's not about pretending it didn't happen, but it's also not about, beating them with a ball bat either.
Right, right. I agree. It's good to call it out in the moment, but you definitely don't want to push the issue. No, we all saw you do it,
Yeah,
because you don't want to shame them either. And Marlene, I'll just add to what you're saying too, because I talk about saying something in the moment as well quite a bit when we do our allyship trainings. And I think an added bonus is that people can see that you're an ally. And, yeah, certainly if you're going to give someone a disciplinary action or whatever, they say
yeah.
praise in public and punish in private or whatever. And most of the time I agree with that. But in these little scenarios where there's these little tiny microaggressions, or a sigh, or a sarcastic comment that's a little too far on the other side of the line, to say something in the moment really shows the other people in the room that you are aware of the culture and those minor interactions, and that they
Do it
matter.
in a really respectful way. And
Yeah.
another piece that I teach too is to say, like, let's say you're not in front of everybody else, but you say, I noticed in the meeting, like, let's say it caught you off guard.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do it then, and you think it still needs to be addressed. Don't lie to yourself and say, I'll do it next time, because you won't.
Right.
Got to circle back around and say, I just wanted to bring something up. My intention is to talk about how we can collaborate and engage more at meetings. I noticed a couple of times when I brought something up, you rolled your eyes and you crossed your arms. Now, the story that I'm telling myself is that you disagree, but you don't want to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm saying is that's my interpretation, but I'm also leaving space for you to say that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's really in integrity, they'll go, wow, thanks for bringing that up. I guess I do disagree. But I'll be honest, it's even hard, as much as I study this, for me to be that much in integrity at every moment. So, because we're so in our subconscious patterns, that until we have had time to process the way someone else receives us, it can be really shocking, and we can feel hurt and misunderstood, versus they're just trying to help me. And I mean, I'm going through some of that, with even the book that I'm writing right now. They put reviewers on it. And gosh,
Mm-hmm.
I was scared, because, like, it's scary to be misunderstood in today's time. It's pretty volatile out there. And, a couple of times I felt, wow, I feel so misunderstood. And I just let it set for a few days. And when I read it again, I went, oh, I totally get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I should have said this. This would have bridged that. Or maybe that is the wrong word, and we're all learning right now. So it's painful sometimes.
It is, but if you're open to it, then you realize, this is an opportunity for me to learn, and all of that. And I'm going to borrow your comment about my story that I'm telling myself is this.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to say my perception is
Yeah.
this, but I like that my story is.
Here's
And
how I
that's okay.
received that. That felt to me sarcastic.
Yeah.
Did you mean it to be? Like, in other words, I don't know your intentions. It may seem that way, and 100 other people may agree with me, but where we get into trouble and what's going on in our world right now is we're judging each other's intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And we get social proof. Yes, that's exactly what they meant when they used that phrase or said that word or didn't acknowledge or didn't speak up. And we don't know. And so to just bring it forth gives the other person awareness. And then maybe the next time they will be different, even if they didn't intend to be bullying or not aware. They didn't intend it. And we offer that grace. So that's my method.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you talk about emotional integrity in your book, and I'm curious the difference between that and something like emotional intelligence or emotional awareness or self-awareness.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a distinction because see, I've got this, I brought it with me so I could read this. The emotional EQ, it says, is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Um, I make a distinction that you have to have emotional awareness, first of all, to have either one of those, right? You've got to be aware of kind of what's going on in your body and how that interprets into a feeling. But emotional integrity, from my perspective, is that you also don't pretend you feel something when you don't. So
Mm-hmm.
while you can manage it and you can let people think, oh, that didn't bother me, or like, I'm not angry, emotional integrity is going a whole step further to say you can only be as honest as your own level of awareness. And so it's okay to say, like, I'm really angry when I hear that and I'm willing to have the conversation, but I need a break until tomorrow to do it. Or to say, no, I can't talk right now because I've had a rough day and I'm going to take it out on you because you allow me to do that so often. Or it's okay. You don't pretend anymore about how something strikes you because you're not going to let them win a point or whatever. It's emotional integrity, that how I feel is how I show up, and that I don't lie about that. But if I'm not capable or if I'm not emotionally regulated, that I'm able to say this isn't a good time. So I kind of have three components that I'm making this distinction in the book. And it's that, first of all, you take responsibility for the only thing you can really take responsibility for, and that's your inner landscape. I take
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for how I feel. You didn't make me feel that way, but when that got said, I received it this way, I interpreted it, and I'm responsible for managing that. I
Mm-hmm.
also face my own dark side. Like, I feel like lashing out. Like, I want to make you wrong. I face that part of me that wants to be right, that wants to be aggressive, that wants to be sarcastic. And I know that about myself. I know that I'm impatient. I don't make excuses for it. I just work on it. And then finally, I represent myself. It's okay for me to say I'm angry, but it's not okay for me to say your intention was to make me angry. So I don't represent you or an entire group. I represent myself and how I received it. And to me, that's the essence of integrity.
Okay, and we've got my friend Mel says, I love the distinction between emotional integrity and emotional intelligence.
Thank
I
you.
I do. I think that's amazing. I also feel like lots of people have a hard time being super honest with themselves, partly because they've not learned how to do that. Also because I think it takes a lot of time to dig into yourself. It takes a lot of time to, especially in our busy world where we've always got things going on. Maybe this is just me personally, but I need time to myself to
Me too.
process. I don't process with my kids running around me or at work. I need that solid kind of alone time. I joke, I like to sit at home and stare at the wall. And what I really mean is I'm just kind of in my zone thinking about things. So how do we, how can we learn to be honest with ourselves? Because you have to be brutally honest with yourself. And that can be hurtful to recognize, gosh, I really wanted to be right. And I was really hoping that person would be wrong. And I was a little aggressive with them because I was angry. And that's hard to kind of own up to. So I'm curious, how do we
It is so hard.
How do we hone in on that
Maybe
skill?
when I get this one figured out, I'll also be on Oprah too.
Yeah, you'll be Oprah because you'll have figured it out.
I think some of it has to do with maturity, wisdom, and you get tired of playing the games at a certain place. And I'm a mature woman at this point in my career. And I think I think the facing the dark side is the important part of, to say that I'm not special. I mean, it's possible for me to feel jealousy even at the age of 62, and it's possible for me to want to be right even when I dearly love someone. And it's very possible for me to be sarcastic even with all that I know, and me to justify it and have people laugh at it. And I get my joy out of that because I'm like feeding my ego. So I think it's about taking yourself a little bit lighter and kind of going, oh, blah, blah, blah. This is the part where I, like want to get sarcastic. Like, it's kind of like, I know this. And I think it's expanding the point of choice. To me, it's a fun game at this point. It's like knowing I have the ability to like just take someone down on the mat and just not doing it. and
Mhm.
just going, okay, like even though I know there's hidden resentments and then someone that I have resentment against comes to me with a problem, it would be so easy to use that weakness to just kind of like let them know that they're not all that in a bag of chips.
Mhm.
And so I think knowing that how I want to live, and I feel such a responsibility because of this book that's coming out to be a good example of the things I say that I believe in, and understanding that I'm still human too. And I also want that grace. But I think there's just a game that you play with your identity to say, can I shape myself to be this person, or am I just at the whim of my emotions and my urges?
Yeah, yeah. There's that famous quote by Viktor Frankl, who wrote, "Man's search for meaning, the last of any human freedoms is choice." I'm sure I didn't say it exactly correctly, but
I
around
absolutely
that.
love him and love that book. And
Yeah.
that's really a lot about what conflict capacity is expanding that. Like, I love saying to my clients when they have a success, whenever they say every bone in my body wanted to lash out at the board meeting with this person that's aggressive, and this time I held my place. And when I held my space, someone else spoke up. And like, I'm trying that on social media right now. Like, I don't have to have the answer. I don't have to point out their stupid, ways of thinking, or, unequal ways of
That's
thinking.
dumb.
Right,
So we shouldn't say that. Got
yeah, I
it.
shouldn't say stupid. I can say like unequal ways of thinking or dysfunctional ways of processing things. Like, I don't have to judge it. I can
Right.
just hold back, and I've got my own judgment. But eventually it creates space for someone else to come in and say, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, oh, great, glad I didn't say that. And so just knowing that I could do it, and I got the arguments, but to sit back on it and to like let it marinate for a while without needing to save the world, I think is part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tell me a little bit about what are the types of services you provide when you're contracted with a client? Sounds like you're coaching, but tell
Yes.
us more about what you
I
do.
look at it from this standpoint of consulting is like an umbrella. And when
Mhm.
we find out what your need is versus like, hey, call me for a workshop. Okay, I will do that, but let's really find out what is your need and why. And if we can find that out, it might be a combination. It might be doing some assessment surveys. It might be a facilitated retreat where we get to the root of what's going on, so then I can make suggestions. It might be working with a top leader or two or three singularly or in a group. It might be an online, like I'm doing some online like programs right now, and some of the skill sets that I teach with coaching. So it really is very dependent upon what the outcome is versus here's the plug and play. I've got some of those, and I
Yeah.
do them, but we have to get clear that that's what we're doing, other than you're hoping I'll change the world and through a workshop. So
Yeah. Another way in which we have things in common. I'm the same thing. It's like, just so you know, one 90-minute training on
yeah,
whatever it is not going to change anything. So we're all clear on.
it has to be embodiment. It has to be embodied, and that takes deliberate practice. And I find that coaching is very valuable for that, for people to come back and say, and they have to trust us, right? They have to trust us enough to be vulnerable and say, I really messed up on that. I did this and I feel bad about it. Okay, well, let's talk about what you wish you would have done. Let's practice. Is there a way to circle back around? Because I find that sometimes people think that if they messed up once, it's done, when in fact it's not. Circle back around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Marlene, thank you so much. This was amazing. I don't know how we didn't cross paths before. I'm so glad to make your acquaintance. And
Me
of course,
too.
our bias that we are, what is it, confirmation bias. We like to hang out with people who remind us how right we are.
Of
And you're one
course.
of those people for me. So I appreciate validating everything I know about the and also thank you for blowing my mind today. I've got to now sit and stare at the wall and think about this whole thing about aggression as avoidance. So I've posted Marlene Chisholm, your website. It's just marlenechisholm.com. And tell us again the name. You've got a couple books, right? And of course, people can reach out to you on LinkedIn and watch your LinkedIn learning courses.
Yeah, I've got one tomorrow, in fact, on decision making. So
Ooh.
about 10 o'clock, I think, Central Time. But yeah, you can. My first book is Stop Workplace Drama. Then it was No Drama Leadership. And then this one is From Conflict to Courage, How to Stop Avoiding and Start Leading. And, on my YouTube channel, I've got some of those past LinkedIn Lives. So if you want to go see any of those to see if this is a good fit for you or your team, just to watch, they're free. So go and check those out.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to go. We've got one quick question. If you have a minute, I've got a minute. Someone says, can we connect, let me see, a narcissistic wound or insecure people, calling them out after a meeting never worked with me. So it sounds like there was an insecure person that you were dealing with and you called them out after a meeting and it didn't work. So maybe you have a little
there's so much in that, like, I think I get what you're saying, and we have to be really careful about how we kind of label people. I'm sure you would say that, right?
Yeah, you can't diagnose your coworkers unless you're qualified.
Try to view them as just someone that for you is difficult to get along with, and then kind of just look at it that way is my first step.
Mm-hmm.
With this is the power structures also, obviously. If you don't have real authority, there's different ways that it's going to work or not work. But yeah, calling them out after the meeting, I think you have to get clear about the behavior that you want and have accountability. It's not just, hey, you did this, and then you expect them to change. I'm not saying you did that. I don't know all the circumstances. Hard to answer here on a live stream like this, but
yeah.
In my book, I'm going to be having a process in one of the chapters. It's the whole method of how to start the conversation and how to create accountability, because the reason that you've told them 1,000 times is because there's no follow-up. Let's talk about how you can get better.
Right.
And this too in HR. Sometimes the old joke is, well, we're going to document so we can fire. I don't agree with that. I feel you document to show what you've tried and you show the progress from that perspective. So the intention has to be right into helping that person improve. And when our intention is so that our feelings aren't hurt anymore, that's not the right intention. The intention is so that they become better. And so just those are a few tips. I hope some of those resonate. Don't know if it does because I don't fully understand your situation, but it's tough. There's people that are just difficult for all of us for different reasons.
Yeah. Well, I don't see your name there, but feel free to reach out to Marlene. You can find her on LinkedIn and maybe shoot her a message or go to her website. And I agree with you. Everything you said. It's performance management and performance conversations are about success, helping create success, not to discipline or fire. So
it's hard when you're angry with someone. Let's face it, when they've stepped on your toes and they've been sarcastic or passive aggressive or whatever word you want to use, when they've had behaviors that are not respectful. And this is another thing that I think will be real helpful to everybody. I always say that disagreement doesn't ruin relationships, disrespect does.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone's shooting off something sarcastic, what you have to do is not trigger back, not give it energy. That's really hard for people like me that like that kind of thing and kind of enjoy that little sparring. But that's really about the need to win.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to withhold that when that's your natural nature, that's one of the skills.
Yeah. So we're back to that hyper self-awareness, which takes a lot of energy. And that's the thing too. I think, gosh, we could talk for another 3 hours on this. I'll just say this and then I'll let you go. I know a lot of times we just sort of let communication be, or we let our feelings fester and we just kind of function. But it actually takes a lot of energy and effort to be self-aware, be aware of your communication. Think to yourself, oh gosh, that was sarcastic. I'm not going to engage. So really and truly, if you're doing communication right, you should be pretty exhausted. Now, couple that with the millions of other things we all have going on. I understand why we all just flippantly communicate, but it's a habit that takes a long time.
That's what I was going to say. I love that you said habit, because really it's about rewiring your brain. And when you understand that you will become a different person, it won't always be difficult. I have new habits now in certain areas and certain places. I really still need a lot of work. And that's what takes the energy. And I know it. And it's just rewiring and creating the awareness of when this happens. I don't do that. I create a different pathway. And then 2 years later, when that happens, you take the other path just automatically. And it's really exciting. In fact, one of my ways that I know I'm growing, and I got this the other day and I went, wow, this was like eating ice cream. It felt so good. Someone said, wow, you are one of the most patient people I've ever seen. I'm like, wow, because honestly, they've named a flower after me and it's called the impatient. I am very impatient. But if someone sees patience in me, it's because I've worked really hard.
Yeah, that's a great compliment. And don't worry, everyone. Marlene's going to be back after her book comes out. We talked about doing it before and after. So you'll be back, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you again.